morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Kinard. I'm privileged to be here with this group of VCs to provide some advice to anybody who's looking to start their own business. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panel, and then we'll dive right in. I have next to me here Tim Young. Tim founded Eniac Ventures 15 years ago and has raised 6 funds to invest in pre-seed and seed founders. Next to him is David Hornick. David's been a venture capitalist for 24 years. He's a reformed attorney. 20 years of those was with August Capital, and then 3 years ago he rebranded as Lobby Capital, as Tim mentioned, based on a series of tech gatherings that he has hosted. Next to David is Barry Eggers. Barry has spent 27 years in venture capital. He co-founded Lightspeed Venture Partners, which has raised over $20 billion across multiple funds. And on the far stage right is, or whichever one that is, Tilli, Kalisky-Bannett. Tilli has been in the venture industry for 15 years, including 10 years at Greylock Partners in Israel and Europe. Tilli currently leads tech investments at SVB Capital. So please give a warm introduction to this panel of speakers. And with that, I'm going to dive right in here with the first question. Tim, I'm going to start with you. In an article you wrote for Forbes magazine 3 years ago, you offered 4 reasons why veterans make ideal founders. The first among these reasons that you listed is that veterans have opportunities to gain experience in high-stakes leadership at a relatively young age. In the military, you're given your team. You can't really fire them and you can't really hire them. In the civilian world, your job is to do both excellently. Further, you have to do that in areas that you don't have very much expertise, like sales, for example. You know, we don't have a lot of sales experience in the military. So advice on how founders should be thinking about this would be really, really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that I've always been impressed. I think one of the reasons I love backing founders and working with backing veterans, working with veterans, is the leadership, is like the servant leadership and high stakes leadership. I think like running and starting a startup is one of the hardest things you can do outside of serving, and there's the ups and downs, emotional. It feels like life and death often when you attach your identity to your company, and so I think it's a really good proxy if you've led people in battle or in the field. I think that is a phenomenal proxy for being a great leader at a startup. But there are differences, and you've highlighted one of them. And talking to a lot of military leaders, like you can't, like no one's left behind, right? Like it's rare. Like if you have someone that's underperforming, you develop them and you help them along. And in the private sector, that just doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't work, especially in like high speed startups. You need to fire fast. And I think that's one of the hardest skills to learn as a founder is no matter what your instincts are, I've never seen anyone fire too quickly. And there's an emotional element, there's families, there's impact on these people, and that's part of the game. But I mean, almost without exception, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, I've never seen a company perform less optimal after a layoff. Like after layoffs, like generally at a company you're hiring, trying to hire all A players, but B and C players kind of get, weave their way in as you get larger and larger. And then, getting rid of the C players motivates the B players to become A players, and it validates the A players to like work hard and feel like they're a place where they're being valued. So firing fast is crucial.
Thank you, Tim. Tilli, did you want to add some?
I would just add onto that. Is the microphone working?
Just hold it up.
So I was with Greylock. I lived in Israel for about 15 years, backed and worked at Greylock in Israel, where all of the founders, as you all may know, have gone through mandatory service. And what I've seen is that the founders, both men and women, they have had this experience of really going through very uncertain, risky scenarios and solving deep and difficult problems. And so the transition to civilian life and working in a company or in a startup where there is just a lot of uncertainty, there is a high risk, it is a high risk environment, is one that is almost as seamless kind of transition. It is not as dramatic as it would appear. There's just so much transferability from being in the military and having worked in just uncharted domains and then transferring that to startups. What we've seen at SVB Capital, where we've backed a number of founders who were ex-veteran, is oftentimes they utilized their experience in the military to solve then issues that they had experienced in the military that they felt were also relevant in the real world. One example is Shield AI, a company that was founded by Brandon Tseng, ex-Navy SEAL, had been deployed in Afghanistan and was thinking, like, why can't I see through walls? Like, why am I unable to, go and have the ability to see where I'm going in these buildings? And then he came out of the military and started a company in that area. So I feel like this transferability is much more seamless than we imagine.
Great, thanks, Tilli. Barry, I'm going to go to you next. You've talked publicly about the importance of feedback and how difficult the adjustment is from the operating world with almost like weekly feedback to the VC world. And you were talking in particular about VCs, but I think it's equally applicable to founders, where there's really not much feedback at all. And you talked about how VCs or founders need to develop different ways to solicit feedback or even to learn to give themselves feedback. And I would say that receiving formal and informal feedback is very integral to the military. We have formal processes where we get graded and ranked on everything all the time. So I guess, help us bridge that gap really from where we have these formal systems in place to really, learning to give yourself feedback or solicit it.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you for everyone in the room for your service to our country. I appreciate that as a civilian. Feedback. Apparently, I've been told in the military you get a lot of feedback, right? Maybe on a daily or maybe hourly basis. In venture capital, you get no feedback. It was one of the hardest adjustments I had coming from the operating world where, people would pat you on the back or say, hey, good job or whatever, and maybe do this a little different. Then you get to venture capital and nothing. There's no feedback at all. It's probably the biggest adjustment. You have to figure out ways to give yourself feedback. You have to figure out ways to at least figure out how you're doing. And most of the time when you're investing, you're doing deal flow, you're investing in companies, you don't get feedback in companies very often. And most of the early feedback is usually negative. So there's not a lot of high-fiving going on. What you have to do, though, is sort of develop your own template of, if you're an investor, how are these companies doing? How am I measuring them? And I like sort of the red, green, yellow, of companies and measuring them almost on a monthly basis of how they're doing and where you want to spend your time. You should hopefully get some feedback from the people in your firm that you're working with. I know that, for the people, our latest hire, Connor Love, who's a military veteran, I got to give him a little extra feedback because he's expecting more feedback. So I give him a little extra feedback on what he's doing. I think he's learning now to develop his own system. But this is one of the hardest things. And I think also, now, as you think about entrepreneurs and starting your own company, I don't know how much feedback you're getting from VCs, but what do? They parachute in once a month for the board meeting. They give you feedback, and you sort of go, well, great, that was great. Some of it's relevant, some of it isn't. I think you have to also develop mechanisms to give yourself daily feedback. And I'm interested to hear from some of the founders about how you're doing that now. But feedback's so important to how we do, right? We want to get better, 1% better every day if we can.
Barry, I thought that was a pretty good answer. I liked it. Kind of on a 0 to 10, I'd give you like an 8.5. It was good, but it was well spoken, and I liked your green, red, and yellow. I thought that was good. So you should adopt that.
Yeah. So, okay. Or orange. Good. You can have orange.
Good. That's good. Yeah.
All right, so David, then.
I hate feedback, just for the record. No, that's fine.
All right, well, we'll shift gears slightly and talk about something a little, it's nuanced, but I think it's accountability. So veterans are also used to a very direct form of accountability. You know when you're messing up. You know when you're doing right. And in many cases, it's getting yelled at or yelling at other people. That's just part of the culture as a veteran. And it needs to obviously be a bit more nuanced in the civilian world, whether you're having accountability amongst your teams or your co-founders or even amongst, investors with your board members and what have you. So you can't be so nuanced, though, that the message gets lost. And help us understand kind of how you would want to strike the right balance, whether, you're talking to your teammate or somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable point. By the way, if you have a VC who is yelling at you, you've chosen wrong. Like this is not a quality you're looking for in your venture capitalist. But it is true. Everything is cultural, everything is societal. What the message you're delivering. I once was driving with 4 little kids in the back of the minivan, and one of them was bothering me, and I said, if you continue doing this, I will literally throw you out the window of this car. And my wife said, you cannot say this to your children. They don't understand sarcasm. I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Raise your hand if you genuinely believe I will throw you out the window of the car. And the kids are like, get a grip. And I'm like, oh, see, they understand sarcasm. We can continue parenting now. But again, you need to know the language of your investors. You need to know the language of your business. Cultures are different. In all fairness, if the culture you want to create is a radical transparency culture, then there is no reason you can't maintain that same level of feedback. But if you want it from your investors, you're gonna have to request it. Because investors, first of all, we're used to being liked. We want you to like us, so we're usually not saying things that are mean, because then you will think ill of us. So we might say, like, I might try another strategy, and the translation of that is, that's a shitty strategy. So as long as you understand, but if you say, like, I want clear and concise feedback at this board meeting, it is insufficient for you to obfuscate, then you'll get the feedback you want. The average, but what we can all tell you is our job is to try and help you, and to a certain degree to try and influence the direction of the company, but we have no authority. So to the extent that you're used to being in a position where there is someone sitting above you with the authority to tell you what to do, there's a board of directors that is collectively your boss, but that's not a lot of authority in the grand scheme of things, and we're much more likely to try and influence than to instruct, and that's just a cultural difference.
And thank you, Dave. You actually just teed up really well my next question for Tilli, which is, veterans are very used to dealing with hierarchical structures, and typically you report to one single person, and reporting to a board is very, very different, as you just said, David. So Tilli, how should founders be thinking about interacting with the board in such a way that everybody needs to feel heard and listened to, but not everybody's advice needs to be followed?
Right, that's a great question. So what I've seen is the best founders really treat their board like wartime allies, right? In the sense that you want to be able to expose all of the different issues that you as a CEO are dealing with in a very transparent way and manner in order to get the feedback and the guidance that David just mentioned, and in order to solve the issues that you're going through, rather than founders, other types of founders that I've seen view the board as the enemy in the sense of I can't tell them too much, they may fire me, I don't want to divulge all of my weaknesses or problems that I'm dealing with. So really, what I've seen is be as a founder, involve your board. They are your collective boss. No single board member has the power or authority to generally to fire the CEO. But as a collective, they also represent different stakeholders, whether investors or executives, that each have the collective desire to see the company succeed. And so as a functional and successful CEO, really you are working for not only the board, but so many different stakeholders, whether it's your shareholders, your employees, your customers. And so there is a web of constituencies who are your boss. And together, the very best CEOs are really able to orchestrate and navigate all of that web successfully.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
I think as a CEO, either you manage your board or they're going to manage you. I prefer that you manage your board, that they work for you, you don't work for them. I think the best CEOs make that happen. What does that mean? It means you're calling on them to provide you leverage, not keep you busy. And maybe the feedback is good, maybe it isn't. Sometimes when you share negative stuff with board members, they freak out because maybe they're young and they haven't been through enough. It's probably good. I think all board members are not created equal. Find a board member or board members that you can have a conversation with on a regular basis and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and have them just listen and give you some feedback. And those are the ones that you can develop trust with. Those are the ones that are going to help you. But I don't feel like you have to have a great relationship with every board member. That just may not happen. Find the ones who are going to help you. They're around. You'll know who they are.
Thanks a lot, Barry.
How was that? Was that better than an 8.5?
Yeah. I
10
mean,
out of
I think
10.
you're making progress. It's a 9. That was maybe even a 9.5. Well done.
Just one quick thing on that as well. That was right on the money. I loved all of that.
9.5.
Also, I think that board meetings are, I mean, occasionally they're productive, but I think they're more theatrical. Like every board meeting there should be no critical decisions or there should be no surprises in the board meeting. I think it's better to do one-on-one in advance of the board meeting. Like every battle's won before the first shot's fired. So like don't go in there and like drop a bomb and expect to get feedback. I think it's better to kind of like coordinate and have everything figured out in advance of going in.
Thanks, Tim. All right, next one to you then. The economics of running a business is just not something that veterans have typically ever had to think about before, right? I think some advice on how to establish comp for execs, employees, co-founders is an area that you as civilian VCs can really help shed some light on. And I can open this up to anybody else who would, because it's a pretty broad question there. But as veterans start to think about, okay, I've been given some financial resources. How do I make sure that I motivate the team? How do I align incentives? How do I hire and fire? I think we've covered that. But really, comp is the question I think a lot of folks could benefit from.
Sure, yeah. There's a lot to that. I mean, there's different elements of comp. There's salary and then the options like equity in the business, ownership in the business, and I think that's really what's important, the most important in this community. That's where the upside is. And so generally, like I always try to, like when we're evaluating an array of candidates, I always like to see, where they're leaning in. Like those that are leaning in on equity, I generally gravitate more towards because they're there to build, they're there to add value there for the long run as opposed to kind of like monetizing their time in the short term. Sales is a little bit different. It's a different breed of human, so they might optimize a little bit differently, but kind of across the rest of the org, I think that's really important. And then all of this is fairly known. There's tons of studies and surveys and law firms and venture funds and Lightspeed does this. Everyone has a survey you can look at that really is generally fairly accurate, gives salary bands for the stage that you're in, et cetera, et cetera. And then for equity for advisors or for key positions, those are more bespoke. You really need to make sure that everyone's motivated, aligned. Comp should align and create motivation, basically. And so then you can reach out again to your trusted board member who might have more has experience on is this individual worth kind of going well above and beyond what's recommended by kind of the conventional survey because they're going to deliver deliver a ton of value. There's also the concept of vesting, right? Like you're going to give equity, but it's going to vest over a period of time, generally 4 years with a 1-year cliff. So if someone's not working out, again, you fire them fast and they don't get all that equity that you put on the table. So I think those are the basics framing. We could go really deep into that, but I think it's a basic framing.
Sure, thanks so much. What I want to do, because we've got a bit of time here, is actually break up the Q&A so that if you had a question in the first 5 minutes, you don't have to wait till the very end to remember it. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask anybody who's got questions to go ahead and start forming. We've got 2 mics on the sides here, and we'll go ahead and ask the next question, but we're going to turn to Q&A for about 10 minutes to break things up, and then we'll have another opportunity at the end to also ask some questions. But thanks, Tim, for that advice on comp. And I know that we're kind of hitting these broader, bigger subjects here, and really, I think that my understanding of the audience is that where most of you are in your careers, you're looking for some general advice to answer questions on, okay, I got out of the military, how do I go do this thing? And if you're anything like me, when I got out, I had a certain set of experiences that, were unique to my service, I guess unique to those who have served, but figuring out how to translate that into the civilian sector was for me at least quite intimidating at times. And yet I knew I had this set of experiences that really set me up for success. And so Barry, I want to talk about something that you've discussed publicly before, and that is what you said you were looking for, in particular to hire young VCs to your firm. But I think that the advice that you offered translated really well to also just founders more broadly. And you talked about, like, the 2 things that you're looking for are sector expertise and the intangibles. And you had a list of intangibles that I think really resonates. I can either, share the list, or I'm sure you know those intangibles you're looking for. But I think the intangibles that you had mentioned, you kind of had said, hey, look, sector expertise, that's a given for the folks that we're trying to hire. It's the intangibles that are hard to find. And yet for veterans, it's the intangibles that we bring to the table. And it's the sector expertise that I think is for a lot of folks, we're trying to figure out, what is that sector expertise? Now, if it's a defense tech firm and that sort of thing, that makes sense given the relative experience. But what I'm really curious to know is, for sector expertise as a VC, like, what are you looking for in founders in particular?
In VCs?
Or, in VCs or in founders, but I think founders more for this audience.
So let me try to answer some of the stuff you've been talking about. That traditionally everyone thinks of the VC filter as, we want to hire people who come from relevant industries, and have gone to some fancy business school, and most of them are white males, frankly, and that's been the system up until about 10, 15 years ago. And what that got us is a reduced share of the global market for venture capital. So now that we're actually welcoming a lot more underserved groups into venture, like military veterans, we realize that we're expanding again our sort of ownership or market share in venture. I like sector expertise. I think it's interesting. Is it enough? No, I think if I look at the people that we've hired over the years, and the success rates, it actually goes more toward the intangibles. What are the intangibles? Self-starter. We're not great managers at venture, so you need to figure out what you need to do every day, right? Persistence. You get a lot of no's. Are you going to keep knocking on the door? Teamwork, right? Venture capital is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. I don't care what the Midas list says. What are the other ones? EQ. You got to be able to understand how people are feeling, and you got to put yourself in their shoes.
Seeing the big picture and selling skills, I think those
skills,
are...
You're selling into deals. How are you going to do that? Are you personable? So let me give you an example, sort of real-life example. I get an email from this guy, Connor Love, and he's in Iraq. And he says, I'm about 6 months of duty left in Iraq, and then I'm coming back, and I'm actually going to the Stanford Business School. I know nothing about venture capital, but I'd love to learn. I'm thinking, well, this guy's emailing me from Iraq. Okay, sure, I'd love to talk to you. So we set up a time. We got on the phone. We're talking, and he goes, and I could hear stuff in the background. He goes, "Oh, we're getting sort of pelted a little bit. So he goes, let me, hold on for a second. You know, and it was in the middle of them getting, I guess, you know, there was some stuff going on. And then he comes back and says, okay, we're good. How about as the next step, let me put together some thoughts on what I could do for you guys, and I'll work for free. Okay, so we have another call. He had put together this whole sort of thing on, you know, what he could do for us for the summer as a summer internship before he went back to Stanford. And it was great. And I'm like, okay. And when I ran it through our team and people met him, and it's like, this guy knows nothing about the sector, but he's a fast learner, and he's a self-starter, and he's a leader. Let's hire him. So we hired him for the summer. We actually paid him because you can't have people work for free. And we liked him so much that we worked with him throughout business school, and now he's a partner with us. And he didn't have any sector expertise. So is it nice? Yes. But the intangibles, to me, are what separates the winners from the losers in venture.
I would just add on, I think that's exactly spot on. On the sector piece, what we've seen is that founders coming from the military, they find a problem, whether it was often in the military or right after the military, that they encountered, and then they try and solve it. It doesn't have to be a defense problem necessarily. As an example, one of the founders I backed as an angel, he was a fighter pilot in the Israeli army, and was flying a plane, and then encountered weather difficulties, almost lost control of the plane, couldn't see the runway, and realized how important understanding weather and predicting weather is, not just in the military sector, but also in civilian. He ended up starting a company called Tomorrow.io that does hypergranular weather prediction that he sells to enterprises, all sorts of enterprises, no defense, so he's not selling it to the military at all, but he was able to identify a problem that he personally had experienced and then said, okay, here's how I'm going to solve it, and then applied all of these fantastic intangibles to then just get it off the ground. This company is now super successful. So it's, you know, if you have the mindset of what problems have I encountered and how do I solve it in the military, outside of the military, that's really where you get some of that sector expertise.
Great, thanks.
I'd love to build on that for just 1 second.
Yeah, please do.
You know, I think one way that I kind of describe these things, I think they're right on the money, is like I like to back people who are doing their life's work. I mean, everyone has sector expertise in something, right? Like we're all on our journey, and then particularly everyone in this room. And I failed to thank everyone for their service. I want to thank everyone for their service, and I'm grateful for that. But everyone is an expert in something, right? Whether that was something in your personal life, something in your professional life. And as you move, as an entrepreneur, as you move through this world, you identify problems, and then you identify solutions to those problems, look at them as a possible product, see how big the market is, and then go out and solve it. And that's basically the foundation of being a founder and an entrepreneur. And everyone in this room can do it. And I believe that everyone that wants to be a founder, there is something that they were put on this earth to build. Your goal is to figure out what that is and to build it.
Thanks, Tim. I think we've got a question here, question or two. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm going to be asking lots of questions today.
Just speak into the microphone, though. Get in there.
Hey, Barry, I love that you're telling a bunch of stories about Connor. I played baseball with him at school, so tell him Jonathan at Wallaby says hi.
Can he hit a curveball?
No. But my question is actually for Tim or anyone on the panel who is investing in pre-seed or seed. We're kind of in this stage where we're trying to figure out, do we want to take money? What would it be for? What are the milestones that we need to hit? What are you looking for on the investor side to kind of figure out what is the right team to invest in, or what is the right stage of business to invest in? There's a million milestones that we've hit. There's a million more that we're going to hit. You go read a bunch of different articles about what people are looking for. I guess just like help us figure out like what it is seed actually means for investors.
Yes, I think you're asking the right questions. I think the first question you should ask yourself is, can I avoid venture capitalists? And if the answer is yes, then you should.
Do so.
Yes. provide a little bit of value and more money, and we take a lot in return. Some more than others, and I think everyone would the more experience you have in venture, the more you kind of move towards that opinion of venture capitalists. Like I'd also like to thank Tim for putting this on. Like, it's unbelievable what he's doing for the community. But he, after I invested in one of his companies, and then the next time he built a company, he's like, I'm not doing that again, and he didn't, and he built a profitable company that's made, a lot of money without raising any capital. So if you can do that, definitely do that. Control your own destiny, control your own, grow organically, not some metrics that, venture capitalists want you to double, triple revenue every year. Grow the pace that you want to grow, hire the pace you want to grow at, and then profit how you want to profit, right? Like, dial back and take more profit when you need more money in your personal life. So that it's way better to do that if possible, but it's not always possible. When it's not possible, then you come to us. And so I think that's the first threshold question. And so it's good to ask that. And I think it's out of scope to really dive into what we're looking for. It's a lot, but I focus on two things: team and basically the market size. But it's really about team. And the idea that you have for me is the idea the team has is just one factor for me to evaluate the team, because it's all about the team. Like, maybe a third of the companies that I've built that have gone on to be unicorns weren't doing what I originally invested in. So again, it's the team will persist, but the idea might not. So I really look at the team, and just being in this room shows that you served, you value things greater than yourself. You know how to work hard. You know how to deal in high stress environments. You know how to what an honest day's work looks like, and so that puts you, in my mind, above and beyond most other people. And then beyond that, I know I could go on and on, but maybe someone else wants to try.
Yeah, I'd like to give the first half of that answer about a 4, maybe 4 or 5.
Can I improve?
How can you improve? Be right as opposed to wrong. That's how you improve in the venture business. No, look, I think your point that you're making about, not all businesses are intended for venture is an important one, right? I think that particularly us sitting here in Silicon Valley, there's a sense the prize is venture capital. No, the prize is not venture capital. The thing that you get from venture capital is dilution. So if you want to lose some of your company, then congratulations, venture capital. On the other hand, and this is where I think I differ, there are businesses that are profoundly impacted by venture capital, right? Where there are things you would like to do, there are things that you can't do or that would dramatically accelerate your business that require capital. Those things, yes, you theoretically could get a loan or borrow, all these things, but the reality is we are designed, our purpose is designed to do that, to accelerate it. And there's a very simple measure of whether it's a good idea. If I give you $5 million for 20% of your company, if you can't accelerate the growth of your company and the value of that business by more than 20%, that's a shitty deal. On the other hand, if you take my $5 million and you increase the value of your company by more than the 20% you've given me in exchange for those dollars, that's a good use of my capital. And then I'd say the second piece, and I'm going to jump the gun a little bit on the panel, is venture investors do a lot of stuff. I mean, it is a modest answer that, oh gosh, venture investors are basically fungible money cannons. But the reality is, Barry invented this fucking business. Like, if you get Barry on your board, you've seen how many businesses, hundreds of businesses. You've seen the things that work and the things that don't. You've seen what a great salesperson looks like and what a poor one does. You understand the things that you can leverage, et cetera. So I don't think venture investors are going to transform your business, and I don't think we're going to build your business, but you'd rather have great investors on your side because they've seen a lot of amazing things. The founder of my firm, a guy named, when I was at August Capital, was a guy named Dave Marquardt. And Dave was the only private investor in Microsoft, and he sat on that board for 33 years. And Bill Gates was profitable and didn't need to take on venture, but he decided he would because he wanted the expertise around taking a company public, and that worked very well, it turned out. So anyway, I just don't want to. I don't want to understate the degree to which venture is a fine thing to have, if it's a fine thing to have, except in those circumstances when it's a terrible thing to have. It's clarity.
Tim, David, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Hi, thanks so much for all the kind of insights that are being thrown around today. I hear mixed messaging around how VCs relate to vision. Some VCs will look at it like the founder's commitment to the vision is what's most important, and the business model and other things may change as long as that vision stays consistent. And some will say the vision might be pivoting also. So I'm wondering how you, anybody who wants to take it, kind of look at that relationship to vision with the founders, and kind of maybe more importantly, how you know it when you see it.
Let me just tell a quick story because I think it's relevant, and then I'll let someone give you an actual answer. So one of my VC partners was taking his daughter to visit colleges. And he visited a college, and the college said, the president was speaking to the would-be applicants and said, you realize that the majority of you, in fact, the vast majority of you, will end up majoring in something different from what you came here to major in. And so my partner Andy was talking with his daughter, and I was like, I really like this school, and they have these programs that I really like, or whatever. And Andy said to her, but you just heard the president say that you're almost assuredly going to major in something different from what you think you're majoring in. So maybe we should go find schools that have amazing majors that you don't want to do. And his daughter said, oh my God, that's such good advice. And he said, no, it's terrible advice. And this is sort of the point, which is like, okay, of course we could say, oh great, I don't actually care about your vision because most people will pivot, but that would be insane. On the other hand, we acknowledge that most people will pivot, and that's why we concentrate on you, not on that vision, right?
I would just add, behind a vision, there is a logic that is, why did I come up with this vision? And so in many cases, we will be looking at how you reached, like, what is the logic? What is the underlying thesis behind the vision? Are you backing that up with data? Is there a why now that we all can relate to and understand? And then obviously important to see is that there is a business that can fundamentally support that vision. We obviously understand, and in many cases, the vision will change, the world changes, and having the ability to adapt will be important. But really what is fundamental for us is to see that the logic behind the vision holds, because that logic won't change. When the reality changes, the logic will also support a new reality. So that's a little bit of how we think about it.
So Tilli, I'm going to stay with that though, and ask you this: like, so VC's in for a ton of signal from this one question. Have you worked at a startup before? Right, and so with a lot of veterans who have not yet worked at startups, like, how would you recommend that this audience address that, sort of thing where, VCs are looking for pattern recognition oftentimes and saying no way more often than they say yes. So for veterans who have not yet worked at a startup, how do you couple the answer about vision with also, like, what's your actual experience?
Yeah, so I mean, the experience in the Army is incredible. The founders that I've backed that came from the Army have had very rich experience that, although it may not have been, I worked at Microsoft, that experience has been in building teams, in solving difficult problems. Obviously, in the intelligence units, those types of experiences and backgrounds can be directly relevant for a new company that's being built. And so I would say that, when you're starting a seed company, say in an area that you haven't experienced before, what we will be looking to see is, what can you take from the Army or from your experience before, and are you solving a problem that you have personally felt and experienced and are looking to solve because you feel passionate about that?
Thanks, Tilli.
Super helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Jing Song, and I'm from Genesis Code, a local startup. And we develop software to helping people move the data 10x faster on the internet. We also deliver better security and reliability trusted by US military because we receive funding directly from DoD. So my question is feedback. Both panel talking about the feedback. And as we know, we plan our commercial product, still not launched yet, but we are looking for feedback. Any additional recommendation how to gain feedback so we can fine-tune our product and find the right product market fit?
Well, sir, I had a little bit of difficulty hearing you, but it sounds like you had, shared with us a business that you are starting and then asked for feedback based on a very brief description.
I think he's asking how to get feedback.
How to get feedback.
Feedback on getting
How to
feedback.
get feedback, especially if you have a technology and you are planning market entry. How to gain feedback?
I'll tell you one of the things when we're talking about, because we always say, oh, we invest in people, and then people are like, yeah, so what do you want? And one of the things I always say, and you've heard this already today, is like, great entrepreneurs are amazing salespeople. And in particular, what they're able to do is convince people to do things that are completely insane. Like, take a product that has never been put to market and put it in their infrastructure to test out leave a very safe business and join you in looking at a vision, etc. So the very best thing that you can do is get in front of your potential customers, offer them the capacity to use your product for free in exchange for that feedback, in exchange for that product advice, so that you can evolve the product to meet your customers' needs, and it will serve a lot of purposes. It'll get you the feedback. It'll also be exactly what we're all looking for. The very best thing that can happen is when we say, oh, does that product work? You say, call my customers. They'll tell you it works. And I call them, they say, oh my goodness, this thing is 10x faster. I go, what? 10x faster? That sounds good. So I know that is not a profoundly helpful piece of information, because like, okay, great, how do I go get in front of customers? But the great entrepreneurs are just complete forces of nature, and they find their way in through this community, through other communities, to get to people, to explain what they're building and get it in place and get real live feedback from those customers.
Thanks, David. And I'm going to pause the questions for now. We'll pick them up at the end. But I wanted to ask you as a follow-up to that, David. Like, when we talk about team and the importance of team and investing in people, help us understand, when you think about co-founders and partnering up, there's oftentimes a technical expert in a particular area coupled with maybe that passionate person who's great at telling a story. What concerns do you have when you're talking about like evaluating the dynamics of a team? Where have you seen it be successful, and where have you seen disasters, quite frankly, where maybe somebody has made a mistake in teaming up?
Well, I think the biggest disaster is that you've teamed up because you're trying to build a startup, as opposed to you've teamed up because you want to work together, right? I mean, there's often this, oh, I have a great idea, I just need the technical founder to build it. Oh, I'm a technical founder, but I don't want to talk to investors, etc. And there are lots of inorganic ways that one can connect with people. And then there are lots of really interesting and organic ways that you can connect with people. And one of the questions that we always ask at the firm is, so how did you all meet? Like, how did you founders meet? And it's not like there's a single answer, right? But there are lots of great answers that involve, I was sitting around trying to solve this particular problem, and so had a really clever answer, and that led to us getting together every Tuesday over coffee to talk about the problem, and eventually we decided to solve it. Great. I worked with this amazing person. The two of us were really mission aligned. We were excited about having the capacity to work with each other, and one day, my friend said to me, hey, I was thinking we should probably fix this problem. Great, But if it's, I am a business thinking person, and I now have a technical thinking person, ta-da, startup in a can, it will go poorly, right? And then there's often overlap. There's lots, in the early days of startups, there are infinite number of things to do. And so, it's all hands on deck. So I think there are lots of ways to start. I'll tell you my favorite story. There's an amazing founder who came in and was talking with me about her startup. I said, how'd you meet your technical co-founder? She said, I was at the University of Chicago. I was looking for co-founders. I talked to lots of people. I couldn't find anyone I liked. I realized that on OkCupid, the dating site, you could specify that one of the languages you were looking for a date to speak was programming languages. So I went on OkCupid and I said, I'm looking for someone who speaks these programming languages. And I dated a bunch of people and said, I'm not here to date you. I'm just here to see if you want to work with me on this startup. And it turns out that OkCupid is a really good compatibility engine, and found a really fantastic co-founder who, by the way, she married. That was a pretty good outcome, even though it was an inorganic process. It led to an organic fit. So
Python or JavaScript?
We have a pretty rigorous approach to this, and like a very high bar. Like we generally at Eniac, we will, like, I have to see history with the founding team. Like when I first started doing this, I spent maybe 10% of my time firing co-founders and transitioning them, and then until I started realizing that, like, if they haven't have shared history and then been through something difficult together, then it's completely unpredictable. You know, like how people are going to react in a high stress situation where when the shit hits the fan. And so if they haven't been through that, I love teams that have done it before. Like, you know, this is not their first rodeo. They've done it before. You know, it didn't work. They got the shit beat out of them, excuse my language, and then they want to do it again, and they want to do it again together, then I'm like, okay, like you've been battle tested, and it's a go. And there's proxies for that, and like service is one of them, right? Is a proxy.
Yeah, and in fact, you've written about that. That's one of the things that one of the other 4 attributes was the importance of grit. You know, and I would say the veterans have that in spades. I think one of the challenges that veterans could be thinking through, you know, is this idea of failing forward and failing fast, which is really, really hard because, you know, we're sort of trained culturally. You do not fail, or you continue the mission until it's done. And help us understand that transition in thought, that posture, if you will, of just like going from I will accomplish what I've set out to do at all costs versus I'm gonna pivot, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna be agile, but still be tenacious.
That's a question for me?
Yeah, that was a question.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, that's the art. I talked about like one of the big aspects of like identifying a problem and making your life's work. I think the other thing is knowing like how long to like pound at something before you need to make an adjustment. And it's an art, not a science. It's really, really hard to say. I've seen people fail on both ends. I've seen people just like Charlie Mike, and they're just going for it no matter what. And I'm like, and they just fly the plane into the mountain. And then I've seen people that are timid, and, you know, every 2 months they're like, this isn't working, and they want to pivot and adjust, and they're just not giving it enough time because things take time. And so it really is an art. And I think that's back to like, you know, I was disparaging towards venture capitalists, but there are values, and I didn't mean to offend anyone.
It's near impossible to offend me.
Okay,
I
good.
promise.
We just met, so I don't know. But I think the value, particularly like, you know, guys, you know, the rest of the panel is like they've been through so much of this, so they have an instinct for how long should I continue going after this. And there are also there's realistic constraints as well. Like one thing like as a founder, like, you know, several times a week, if not every day, you should be checking in on like, what is the cash out date? Like you should always intimately know how much time do I have before this is over, and work backwards from that, right? And then figure out what milestones you need to achieve to, you know, get to profitability if you're bootstrapping, or to unlock more capital from a venture capitalist. And you got to be realistic, and you got to look at that, and you got to get feedback, talk to your team, talk to your investors, and evaluate, like, is this gonna work? And if it's not looking like it's gonna work, then you got to do something else. You got to pivot, and that's where I think the experience of investors can help, where we can come in and say, okay, like, let's turn the ship 15 degrees this way and try that. Or you might just completely 180 and try something different. But you always want to be evaluating this and iterating. Experimentation and iteration relentlessly is the key.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks. So Barry, I just wanted to circle back with you on you know, this notion of differentiating as a venture capitalist. You know, the different types of value add that VCs have. Can you kind of help share with the audience, you know, how you see that being differentiated?
Yeah, I mean, we started as a enterprise early stage firm, and now we're global, multi-sector, multi-stage. We pretty much do everything. And I remember along the way with LPs, them asking me the question, well, how are you guys unique? And at first I try to answer it. And then, you know, I listen to my answer, I'm like, oh, we're not really unique. And then they'd, you know, a couple years later, they'd ask me the same question. Again, I tried to answer it. Finally, I decided I would just answer with, we're not unique. We're not that differentiated. We're just better. Yeah. Right? You want good results? We produce good results. And, you know, we're all told that we have to be unique or different to be better. You don't. We could all be doing the same company, but one of us is going to be the best. Right? And so I think that being unique is overrated. Being differentiated is somewhat overrated. Being the best is underrated. So focus on that.
$20 billion doesn't suck.
No, but that means that we have a higher bar for what we have to do in returning capital to people, and it's just you can chase that sort of uniqueness, but I think you can get wrapped up around it. You know, if you're building a business out there, you know the feedback is customers pay you money. That's the best feedback you can get, right? And you know that the feedback from VCs is they want to give you money at higher prices. That's good feedback. And so all that stuff parlays into your success, but also I think everyone in this room is probably pretty damn competitive, right? You want to beat the other company you're competing against. You always want to have great competitors. We have competitors, right? You just want to beat them. And I think that attitude gets you a lot in this industry. So that's why I think we need more vets in VC and more vets that are founders.
Thanks, Barry. I think we've got some time for questions. Sir, if you'd like to step up.
Hey, good morning. Patrick Nansen, Maritime Operations Group. Was recently seeking some advice from a fellow founder with a little more experience than myself about seeking VC funding for a seed fund. And he said, Pat, be careful. Get ready for the white gloves and some very uncomfortable scrutiny, particularly of your cap table, at a stage when maybe equity is all you have to give. So from your perspective as the investors, when the rubber gloves come on, what are some red flags? What are some things not to do?
I mean, look, I suppose there are all sorts of red flags, but if it's a cap table question, right, at the end of the day, we need you to be motivated to build an amazing business. We don't build it. And so there's often this sense of like, oh, VCs are going to buy all of your company and then you're going to do all the work. But those of us who've been in the business a long time know that if you don't have enough equity in that company, you'll lose motivation to build the business. And there's nothing we will be able to do to change that. And we also aren't going to run your business. So to a certain degree, one of the things that when you come into it is, okay, do you own enough of this company? What have you done up until now to raise money, to hire people, et cetera, where you're going to be motivated on an ongoing basis to build this amazing business? And oftentimes, entrepreneurs, look, the cap table is 100% and that's all you get. And so as you start handing out equity to others, et cetera, you're diluting yourself and then ultimately you're diluting your investors. And so we're looking for people who have a concentrated ownership in something they care deeply about and where it will be transformative to them to do disproportionately well, because then we get to come along and cheer along the way. And
I think that you have to think carefully about how you use your equity. I mean, we could have a whole panel on this, but your equity is near and dear as your cash, probably more near and dear, right? What we hate to see is if you come to us and as we see a cap table where there's people that own equity that really aren't going to be helpful going forward. Either they're not part of the employee base or they're not an investor that's going to continue to support the company. Those are sort of dead equity owners. Don't have those, right? You want to give equity to either people that are going to support you and continue to support you financially, or employees that are going to be there long term with you. The big challenge, of course, is it takes 8 to 10 years to build a company, and we have 4-year vesting. And so you don't want to hire a lot of people that out at year 3 or 4, they're like, okay, I'm out of here, I'm going to go do my next thing. How many people believe in the mission that you believe in and have the passion to see it through?
And just to add on that, to the question of, okay, with no resources, you have to give away some equity, right? That's understood. But the question is, how much equity are you giving away to convince a potential employee that you're building something very big? If there's a lot of potential in the business that you're building, you don't have to give away a massive chunk of equity to attract high quality employees and partners, right? So we want to be able to see you haven't given away 10% to your first employee because that was the only way you could get him or her on board. So really understanding, like, it kind of relates to how well are you able to, what is the vision for the company? Are you building something, big and meaningful, and how much are you giving away to attract high quality employees?
Thanks, Tilly. I think we got a question over here.
Dale Lakes, CEO, co-founder, Verify. I have a question about first-time hires. So just some quick context on me. I've spent the past 6 years in the Army and cyber. I recruited, trained, and led about 25 engineers from various different technical backgrounds as soldiers. The Army is very good at training people with a variety of experience to meet a common baseline standard. Now, as a founder, what I'm trying to do is find people who are way smarter at me at certain things to bring them in. So what are some things I should be looking for, some of those intangibles, to make sure that those people with more experience can augment me appropriately?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. In the cyber world, there are a lot of very, very talented people that come from either the military or outside the military, and there's a technical approach here that I think if you have something that is unique and that has a high degree of probability of success, people that have that experience will be digging into the technical approach and can be convinced, right? If there's a new attack surface, a new approach to solving cyber risk that you're bringing to the table, and you've got what you believe to be a differentiated and exciting opportunity, I think selling the technical story will be a great mechanism to attract high quality folks to come on board, whether it's salespeople or engineers or what have you. Just make sure that the story checks and that you have something that is very that's unique and has huge potential.
You said something that I think you already answered your question. You said you're looking for people smarter than you. A lot of CEOs don't do that. I think you want to hire people smarter than you, people that are going to challenge you, not take orders. I don't know if that's the same as the military with how you build great teams, but
It's exactly the same.
I suspect you succeed. You succeed by taking in people into your company that are going to challenge you and be smarter than you. I always think, the people that like to be the smartest person in the room. I'm like, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. Be a dumb room, right? You want to surround yourself with smart people that are going to challenge. That's how you build a successful company. And if you look at the CEOs that do it over and over and over again, that's how they win.
Sir?
Between seed round and Series A, you folks, how many people would you recommend on a board and any kind of direction as to what people should be on that board? Thanks.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So losing control, so you want to control your board as long as you possibly can. And there's going to be a constant tension between investors and founders for board control. When you control your board, you control your destiny, you can't be replaced. And so it's very important. And so, as you go through, the general kind of consensus is that you add a new board member, a new investor board member to your board with each round. But you really got to be careful. You got to look at the numbers and be realistic. So say you have like 2 common, board seats, 2 founders on the board, then you bring on a seed investor. So now it's 2 common, 1 investor. Then you come one of these guys and you raise a Series A. They want to join the board, and they want to add an independent board member. So then you have two founders, two investors, and an independent board member where they're going to say it's mutually agreed upon. And at that point, I argue that you've lost control of your board. I mean, that independent board member might or might not side with you in a dispute. And so I think it's very careful. You have to be very careful and very thoughtful about who you add to your board. I think independent board members are amazing. Advisors are just as amazing and aren't part of the governance of the organization. So if you can, sometimes you have to give someone the independent board membership to get like the talent that you want to. They won't just take an advisory role. But I think you have to be very, very thoughtful on the numbers. And you can do things like often when I have a founding team that I really want to support and I want to see them control the board for a long time, we'll create empty common seats. So we'll create like 3 empty common seats. So there'll be 2 founders and 3 common. So there'll be 5 common seats, 1 investor seat. And all this is negotiated with each round, but at least it sets kind of a precedent, and it sets something that you at least have to get bargained out of the deal if you don't have leverage. But I think you really want to be thoughtful on board control. And then I guess also you want people that will challenge you. There's to be overly simplistic, there's like 3 types of VCs. There's those that are just going to be cheerleaders and just like tell you what everything you're doing is great because they're scared to give you feedback or they don't know what they're doing. There's those that are just like wildly egotistical and think that how they've done it and how they've seen it is the only way to go. And there's the people that are good and in between. And you really want to kind of screen out those first 2 if you can. But I could go on, but it's just a few thoughts.
Thanks, Tim.
The right answer is the board should be as small as it can be.
Thank you. I'm going to sit down right now. I like that.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi, thank you for sharing your perspective on kind of the pros and cons of working with VCs. As an early stage founder focused on paying customers and trying to bootstrap, I'd love to hear your perspective, or would appreciate it, around how you think about dilution and specifically valuation. I know it's set by the market, but any advice you could share on kind of navigating that pathway as an early stage company?
I'll give a quick answer on dilution. As a CEO, don't worry about the size of your slice of the pie. Worry about the size of the pie.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, just to add on a little bit about valuation, depends on the stage of the company, but when we look to do a valuation, we would look for both public market comps as well as private market comps, comparables that we believe give some sort of proxy to what the company should be valued at the earliest stages, like pre-seeds or seeds, where it's you may not have revenues, you may not have the metrics at that point. We would be taking into account all the assets that you bring to the table, whether it's a pipeline or POCs or design partners, how far and how advanced you are in the process to determine how mature is the company, what advantages do you bring to the table, and then there's kind of a benchmark of where pre-seeds or seeds are. Typically, law firms would be able to provide you some guidance as to what they are seeing across the board for early stage companies in your geography, in your space, around seeds, pre-seeds. There are, those benchmarks are more widely known, but we would take an approach of looking at all the assets that you bring to the table on those earlier stages as well.
That's helpful, thank you.
And all I'd say is that's all true until there's more than one person who wants to fund you, and then the market decides what the price is. And if you're fortunate enough to have a bunch of folks who want to fund you, then you get to measure price versus quality. And remember, I was just talking with a consultant we hired for a company I sit on the board of called Bill.com. And she said, so tell me about your work with the founder, René Lacerte, the CEO. And I said, well, I've been working with René Lacerte for 23 years. He was the first guy I invested in. I've been in 2 companies with him. I've been with him longer than he's been married to his wife. This is a very big, important relationship. Valuation may not be the most important thing after 23 years, but it may be to you. And so just know that there are lots of factors when you're raising money that you should think about.
Thanks so much, David. So I'm going to wrap it up from here and just say that, for me personally, I benefited in a couple different parts of this conversation, but lots of really great wisdom and experience here shared. To me, the key takeaways that I'm going to take with me are the importance of team and teaming up to found a startup versus teaming up to solve a problem together. I think that was really a helpful contrast that you drew, and I think the conversation around taking venture capital or not was really helpful, as well as just the CEO's job is to manage the board and not the other way around. And certainly going to take those lessons with me as I go about my business, being an investor in early stage companies on behalf of the intelligence community at InQtel. And so I wanted to thank all of you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with this panel, or with the audience here, and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you all.
Well.